You never really know when your life will change forever. For me, it happened on Thanksgiving night. My father thought he was about to make a big announcement, a decision that would shake the entire family. But what he didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment for over 10 years. He believed I was the weakest, the forgotten child, the one who would never amount to anything. And yet, I was the one holding a secret so powerful, it would bring him to his knees. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or pushed aside by the people who should have believed in you the most, then listen closely, because this story is for you. My name is Samantha Reed. I'm 32 years old, and in my family I've always been the one people forget about. The middle child. Not the firstborn son. Not the glamorous youngest daughter. Just stuck in the middle. Every Thanksgiving, I drive back to my parents' huge house in Brookfield, one of the richest suburbs outside of Boston. The place looks like something out of a movie. 6 bedrooms, a pool that stays heated even in the winter. Gardens so big they need 3 full-time landscapers. From the outside, we look like the perfect American success story. But inside, things aren't as picture-perfect as they seem. The story of my family's wealth began with my grandfather, Robert Reed. Back in 1978, he started Reed Technologies in his garage with nothing but an old computer and an idea. His software helped businesses manage their inventory. He worked day and night, turning his little dream into a regional company. By the time he passed it down to my father, the business was already worth millions. My father, Richard Reed, took over in 1995. He wasn't satisfied with a small company. He wanted power, influence, and respect. Under his leadership, Reed Technologies exploded. He grew it from a $10 million family business into a $50 million enterprise with hundreds of employees and clients all across the country. In Boston business circles, the Reed name became a symbol of wealth and power. And Dad loved to remind us of that fact every single chance he got. At family gatherings, on vacations, even at Sunday barbecues, Dad would turn every conversation into a lecture about his success. He'd brag about how he expanded the company, how he beat competitors, how Reed Technologies was unstoppable. And of course, he'd look at my older brother like he was the heir to a throne. My brother Nathan is 6 years older than me. He's always been the golden child in my father's eyes. Even though he was never really serious about anything, Dad believed he was born to take over the company. Nathan studied communications, partied through college, and somehow walked into a vice president job the very next day after graduation. He spends more time on his yacht or chasing after women than he does at work. But none of that matters to Dad. In his mind, Nathan is the future of Reed Technologies. Then there's me, the invisible one. At 12 years old, I was already obsessed with computers. I taught myself how to code. By 15, I built my first app. I went on to study computer science and business at MIT, graduating with honors. I had ideas, real ideas, about how to modernize the company and take it to the next level. But every time I tried to speak up, Dad brushed me aside like I was a child playing pretend. And finally, my younger sister, Olivia, the baby of the family. She never cared about the business. She used the Reed name to become a lifestyle influencer, showing off our wealth online to hundreds of thousands of followers. She posts photos of our estate, of family vacations, of expensive clothes and luxury dinners. People adore her curated old money image, even though she's never lifted a finger for the company that pays for it all. And my mother, Catherine, she's from old Boston money. Elegant, calm, always with a glass of wine in her hand. She doesn't like conflict, so she avoids it. Whenever Dad dismisses me in front of the family, she just sighs, maybe tries to say one sentence in my defense, then gives up the second Dad shoots her a look. I love her, but deep down I know she never fought for me. Every family dinner felt the same. Dad and Nathan dominating the conversation. Olivia talking about her social media brand. Mom sipping Chardonnay trying to keep the peace. And me sitting there with all my ideas and knowledge invisible. If I tried to join in, Dad would just smile at me in that patronizing way and say, "That's sweet, Samantha, but leave business to the people who really understand it." The breaking point came when I was 22. Fresh out of MIT, I had developed a cloud-based system that could have completely changed the company's future. This was years before competitors would even think of it. I prepared everything, a business plan, market research, technical models. I worked for months getting it ready. Finally, Dad let me present it at a board meeting. I'll never forget that day. I walked into the boardroom, laptop in hand, heart pounding with excitement. This was my chance to finally prove myself. The board members, all old men who had been friends with Dad for decades, stared at me politely, but with that look like they didn't take me seriously. 10 minutes into my presentation, Dad sighed loudly and raised his hand to cut me off. "I think we've heard enough," he said with a fake smile. Then he turned to the board, shrugged, and added, "My daughter just graduated college. She's full of these academic ideas. Interesting but not practical. Our clients don't want experiments. They want stability." The men chuckled and nodded. Just like that, my moment was over. I remember packing up my things, my face burning with humiliation, as they moved on to the real business of the day. My father had dismissed me in front of everyone, treated me like a child, and destroyed the one chance I had to show them what I could do. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done waiting for his approval. I was done being invisible. If my father refused to see my worth, I would prove him wrong. Not by begging for a place at his table, but by building my own. So I left Boston. I left my family, and I started from scratch in San Francisco. When I stepped off that plane in San Francisco, I carried just one suitcase, a used laptop, and $5,000 in savings. That's all I had. No safety net, no family support, no promises of inheritance. Just me, and the determination to prove my father wrong. Those first years were brutal. I rented a tiny studio apartment in a rough neighborhood. The kind of place where the walls were so thin, I could hear my neighbor's television all night long. The rent swallowed most of my budget. After paying bills, I barely had enough left for food. Ramen noodles, cheap coffee, and day-old bread became my diet. Still, I worked. Day and night I worked. At first, I took whatever jobs I could get. Entry-level coding jobs, freelance projects, anything that would keep me afloat. 80-hour weeks weren't unusual. Some nights I'd code until sunrise, my eyes burning, my hands shaking from too much caffeine. But I didn't care. Every extra dollar I saved went into building something of my own. I knew I couldn't use the Reed name. If people knew I was Richard Reed's daughter, they'd assume I had family money behind me. They'd never respect what I built. So I created a new identity. I started a company called Summit Solutions, and I used the professional name Erin Miles. The E&M stood for my real name, Samantha Marie. But no one knew that. To the world, Erin Miles was just another ambitious founder trying to make it in Silicon Valley. And that was exactly how I wanted it. At first, Summit was just me, sitting in that cramped apartment building small software systems for startups. I kept my prices low to win clients, then reinvested every penny back into the business. No fancy office, no big salary, just growth. By year 3, I had hired my first employees. 10 people crowded into a rented office in the Soma district of San Francisco. That's when the breakthrough came. I developed a platform that allowed old, outdated computer systems to work smoothly with new cloud technology. It was almost exactly what I had pitched to my father years before. The idea he had laughed at. The idea he said was not practical. Well, it turned out it was very practical. And it changed everything. Clients started lining up. Venture capitalists came calling, eager to invest. But I remembered the lesson my father had taught me without realizing it. Control is everything. So I turned down the offers. I kept majority ownership. I refused to let anyone else take away what I had built with my own sweat and sleepless nights. Over the next 7 years, Summit Solutions grew bigger and stronger. I carefully acquired smaller companies that added to our services. Our valuation shot up to over $200 million. We opened offices in 3 cities. My name, Erin Miles, became respected in the tech industry. And yet, no one knew it was really me. I avoided public appearances whenever I could. At conferences, I sent my COO to do the talking. When I absolutely had to show up, I changed my appearance slightly. A different hairstyle, glasses, clothes that made me harder to recognize. My family had no idea. During holiday phone calls, if they even bothered to call, I kept my answers vague. I'm doing okay. Still figuring things out. Dad never asked for details because in his mind I was already a failure. That was perfect for me. But while I was building Summit, I was also watching Reed Technologies. Quietly, carefully. I read every quarterly report. I studied their weaknesses. I followed their clients and suppliers. And I saw what my father refused to admit. His empire was crumbling. The technology was outdated. Competitors were pulling ahead. Market share was slipping year after year. Reed Technologies wasn't the unstoppable giant he believed it to be. It was sinking. That's when I started my plan. Through Summit, I began buying shares in companies that worked closely with Reed Technologies, suppliers, partners, even clients. Bit by bit, I positioned Summit as the perfect buyer to take over. 6 months before Thanksgiving, we sent an anonymous acquisition offer. Of course, my father rejected it immediately, probably without even reading it. His pride wouldn't allow him to consider that someone else might save the company. But that was fine, because I knew another opportunity would come. 10 years after that humiliating boardroom moment, I was ready. Summit Solutions was thriving. Reed Technologies was weakening. And Thanksgiving was approaching. This year things would be different. It was a week before Thanksgiving. I sat in my corner office overlooking the San Francisco Bay, finalizing the most important deal of my life. My assistant stepped in holding a folder. "Your flight to Boston is confirmed for Tuesday at 11, she said. "Are you sure you don't want the executive team with you for the signing?" I shook my head. "No, this is personal. I need to do this alone." After she left, my phone rang. It was Isabella, my best friend since those early days in the cheap apartments. She was the one who had heard me crying through the wall when things felt impossible. She was the one who kept me going. "Are you really doing this?" she asked without hesitation. "After everything they did to you? After years of barely speaking to them?" I turned in my chair, staring out at the water. "Yes, I need to be there in person when it happens. I need to see his face." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Just remember the last Christmas, when he announced Nathan's promotion right in front of you while you sat there with your Series B funding round no one even knew about. You didn't speak to them for months after that." The memory burned in my chest. Dad raising his glass, bragging about Nathan, while ignoring me completely. "This time will be different," I said firmly. "This time I won't be invisible." That night I started packing. But this time I didn't pack like the old Samantha who had left Boston with nothing. I packed like the woman I had become. Armani suits, a Chanel dress for Thanksgiving dinner, Louboutin heels, jewelry that was simple but unmistakably expensive, Patek Philippe watch. For years I had downplayed my success around my family, letting them believe I was struggling. But not this time. This time I wanted them to see it, to feel it. Tuesday morning I boarded a private jet. I usually flew commercial, I preferred it. But for this trip I wanted to make a statement. During the flight, I reviewed the acquisition contract again and again, making sure every detail was perfect. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Years ago I had flown coach back to Boston, crammed into the middle seat, eating peanuts, broken, exhausted. And now, here I was arriving in style, ready to buy the very company my father had once humiliated me over. When the jet landed at a private airfield outside Boston, a black Bentley was waiting for me. Another indulgence I never bothered with in my daily life, but today it mattered. As the car drove me through the streets of Brookfield, past familiar houses and neighborhoods, I felt something stir inside me. Nostalgia, yes, but also steel determination. I wasn't the forgotten middle child anymore. I was coming home with power, and my family had no idea what was about to hit them. The Bentley rolled to a stop in front of the Reed estate. The house looked exactly the same as it always had, maybe even grander. White colonial columns, perfectly trimmed hedges, the kind of manicured lawn that looked too perfect to be real. A wreath already hung on the front door, even though Thanksgiving wasn't over yet. That was my mother, always ready for the next holiday, always chasing perfection. I stepped out of the car, heels crunching against the gravel driveway. My chest tightened as I stared up at those tall windows, the same ones I had stared out of as a teenager when I felt trapped in this house. Only this time, I wasn't walking in as the forgotten daughter. I was walking in as the secret owner of a $200 million company. I told the driver to wait and walked up the front steps. The door swung open before I could even knock. My mother, Catherine, stood there with a wide smile. She looked me over from head to toe, her eyes pausing on the watch around my wrist, the cut of my dress. For a split second, her smile faltered. Then she wrapped me in her perfume-scented arms. "Samantha, darling," she said, her voice warm but with that little edge of curiosity. "You look different. Is that a Rolex?" "Patek," I corrected softly, hugging her back. "Good to see you, Mom." She ushered me inside, chattering quickly, almost nervously. We're all so excited you're here. Olivia just hit another milestone online. 1 million followers, can you imagine? And Nathan, well, he's already started celebrating with a glass of scotch. I set my bag down in the grand foyer. The crystal chandelier sparkled above me, the same one that had hung there my entire life. Everything smelled like polished wood and expensive candles. It was exactly as I remembered, and yet it felt like I was a stranger walking into someone else's museum. Your father's in his study, Mom said, lowering her voice like it was a secret. He's been very busy with some big deal. Hush hush, even with me. I smiled, though inside I was fighting back a laugh. I already knew exactly what deal he was working on. I'll go say hello, I told her. My father's study had always been off-limits growing up. Dark mahogany shelves, leather chairs, the smell of cigar smoke that lingered even when he wasn't there. It was his kingdom, his fortress. I knocked once, then opened the door without waiting. A small rebellion. Dad looked up, glasses perched on his nose. For just a moment, surprise flickered across his face, quickly replaced by mild indifference. Samantha, he said, standing to give me a stiff hug. You made it. The flight was smooth, I replied casually. Private is much faster. He blinked. Private? That must have been expensive. I shrugged lightly. Business is good. For the first time I saw something shift in his eyes. Confusion. Curiosity. But before he could ask anything, his phone rang. He held up a finger and turned his back to me, answering it. I glanced down at his desk. Papers were spread out, and right on top I saw it. The acquisition proposal. My company's logo, Summit Solutions, in bold letters. My pulse quickened, but I kept my face calm. When he hung up, he shuffled the papers into a folder quickly. Big things happening at the company, he said briskly. Things you wouldn't understand. The old dismissal. The same words I had heard my entire life. But this time they rolled right off me. Of course, Dad, I said smoothly. I'll let you get back to it. Upstairs, my old bedroom looked exactly the same. Debate trophies, computer science awards, my MIT pennants, all still on the walls. A shrine to a younger version of me, frozen in time. After freshening up, I went downstairs. That's where I found Nathan, my brother, already nursing a drink at 3 in the afternoon. Well, look who decided to show up, he smirked, lifting his glass. The prodigal sister returns. Still playing with computers in California. I forced a polite smile. Something like that. How's that little startup of yours? Making any money yet? He asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Before I could answer, Olivia burst into the room, phone raised at the perfect selfie angle. Everyone look, she announced to her live stream. Samantha's here. Family reunion. She leaned in to air-kiss my cheeks, never lowering the phone. Wow, you look expensive, sis. Did you finally find yourself a rich boyfriend? No, I said, stepping out of her frame. Just working hard. She giggled, ignoring the bite in my words. Nathan leaned close to Olivia, pretending to whisper but loud enough for me to hear. She's probably single as ever. Still married to her laptop. I ignored him. Years of practice had made that easy. Then, right on cue, Dad's voice boomed from his study, his excitement carrying through the house. Yes, absolutely, he said loudly. Tomorrow after Thanksgiving. 50 million is the final offer. Summit Solutions has been very insistent on the terms. My heart raced, but I kept my face neutral. Neither Nathan nor Olivia paid attention. They were too busy showing off to each other. I excused myself to the kitchen, needing a moment alone. The housekeeper, Maria, had worked for us for over 20 years. She looked up from chopping vegetables and smiled warmly. Miss Samantha, she said. Good to see you. California agrees with you. You look well. Thanks, Maria. Need any help? I asked, even though I already knew she'd say no. She shook her head, chuckling. Your mother wants everything perfect. Big day, she says. Your father has news. I nodded knowingly. So I've gathered. For a second, I felt a rush of gratitude. Maria had always been kinder to me than most of my own family. Pre-dinner drinks were painful. Mom fluttered around with forced cheer. Dad kept checking his phone every few minutes. Nathan bragged loudly about his new boat, making sure everyone knew the name engraved on the side. The Reed legacy. Olivia stayed glued to her phone, documenting every second for her followers. I sipped my wine slowly, staying quiet. But this time, I wasn't the hurt daughter waiting to be acknowledged. I was watching, studying, waiting for the perfect moment. Dinner would change everything. Dinner at the Reed estate was always a performance. It wasn't just a meal, it was theater. The crystal chandelier shining overhead. The massive mahogany table polished to perfection. The china set that only came out on holidays. Sterling silver candlesticks with long ivory candles. And of course, a centerpiece my mother had paid far too much money for, made of pumpkins, gourds, and autumn leaves. This wasn't dinner, it was a stage. As usual, I was seated at the far end of the table, as far from my father as possible. Nathan sat to Dad's right hand, his girlfriend Amber at his side. Olivia sat on Dad's left, her phone never far from reach. Mom took her place opposite Dad, with me beside her, separated from the inner circle by a long stretch of wood. Course after course came out. Butternut squash soup with cream, harvest salad with candied walnuts, a 25-pound golden turkey, carved by Dad with slow, deliberate precision as Olivia filmed the whole thing for her followers. And here's Daddy carving the turkey, she narrated. Just like his father before him, continuing the Reed family tradition of excellence. Mom winced slightly and took another sip of wine. I just smiled to myself. Once everyone's plates were filled, Dad lifted his glass. As is tradition, he said proudly, let's go around the table and share what we're thankful for this year. It used to be a sweet moment, but over the years, it had turned into something else, more of a bragging contest than a moment of gratitude. Nathan went first as the oldest. I'm thankful for another strong quarter at Reed Technologies, he said. Even though I knew from research the company had actually lost market share. I'm thankful for my new yacht, the Reed Legacy. And most of all, I'm thankful for Amber. He squeezed his girlfriend's hand, while she giggled and kissed his cheek. Olivia was next, phone still recording. I'm thankful for hitting 1 million followers this year. I'm thankful for my partnership with Luxury Life Cosmetics. And I'm grateful to represent the Reed name to the world every day. She flashed her perfect smile at the camera. Dad nodded approvingly, even though he had often complained privately about her frivolous career. When it came to me, I set down my fork and spoke clearly. I'm thankful for life's lessons. That rejection can lead you to the right path. That persistence matters more than privilege. And that success is the best teacher. I'm thankful for finding my own way. Dad frowned slightly, maybe hearing something hidden in my tone, but he quickly moved on to his own speech, all about his legacy and his accomplishments. Mom mumbled something about family and health, her words already slurred by wine. As dessert was being served, pumpkin pie, pecan pie, whipped cream piled high. Dad suddenly tapped his knife against his crystal glass. The sharp ping silenced the room. Even Olivia lowered her phone. I have an announcement, Dad said, standing tall at the head of the table, his voice carrying that authority he loved to wield. An announcement that affects everyone here. The air shifted. I could feel it. As you know, he continued, I've dedicated my life to building Reed Technologies into a leader in the industry, but all good things must evolve. The time has come for change. I've decided to sell the company. The words hit the room like an explosion. Nathan choked on his wine. What? Dad, you can't be serious. Olivia gasped, hand flying to her chest. But what about the Reed legacy? My brand is built on being the Reed heiress. Dad held up his hand for silence. I've been in negotiations for months. The deal finalizes tomorrow. Who's the buyer? Nathan demanded, his voice cracking with anger. A highly successful investment firm, Dad said proudly. Summit Solutions. They're paying $50 million, which is more than generous given the company's recent struggles. My heart pounded. My moment was coming. But Dad wasn't finished. He raised his chin, his expression unreadable. And the proceeds from the sale will not be going to you children as inheritance. Your mother and I will be using part for retirement. The rest will fund the Reed Foundation, a charitable organization to support technology education. The room erupted. Nathan slammed his fist on the table, rattling the china. That's our birthright. You promised me the company would be mine. Olivia burst into tears, though she kept her phone angled carefully to capture her crying face. What happens to me? What about my followers? You can't take this away. Mom sat frozen, staring at Dad with wide eyes. Through it all I stayed calm. I took slow bites of pecan pie like nothing in the world could touch me. Finally, Mom noticed. "Samantha," she whispered, peering at me. "You don't seem surprised." The table fell quiet. All eyes turned to me. I set down my fork with care. "Actually, I only have one question," I said softly. I looked directly at my father. "Who is the buyer?" His chest puffed with pride. "Summit Solutions," he repeated. "They're paying $50 million. It's a very generous offer." I took a sip of water, steadying myself for what came next. The air was electric. "Dad," I said clearly, "I am Summit Solutions." Silence. For a few heartbeats, nobody moved. Even the candles seemed to flicker more slowly, as if the entire house was holding its breath. Then chaos. Nathan shot to his feet, knocking over his wine glass, red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. "What the hell are you talking about?" Olivia's hand shook so hard her live stream almost slipped. "Oh my God," she whispered into her phone. "My sister just said she owns Summit Solutions." Mom reached for her wine glass, found it empty, and grabbed the whole bottle instead. I stood calm, steady. "The name I've been using professionally is Aaron Miles. For the past 10 years, while you all thought I was struggling, I built Summit Solutions into a $200 million company. And tomorrow, Dad, I'll own Reed Technologies." The room was frozen. For a moment, no one even breathed. My words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Then everything happened at once. Nathan's face turned red, his voice shaking with rage. "You're lying. This is some kind of joke. Summit Solutions is run by Aaron Miles, not you." I reached into my bag, pulled out a sleek platinum card case, and slid one of my business cards across the table toward Dad. The Summit Solutions logo glinted under the chandelier. "Actually," I said calmly, "I am Aaron Miles. I've been using that name professionally for the last decade." Dad snatched up the card, his hands trembling. He stared at it like it might catch fire. His voice cracked. "No, this is impossible." "It's not impossible," I said, keeping my tone even. "You just never bothered to look. You dismissed me, Dad. You didn't see me then, and you don't see me now. But it's real. I built this company from the ground up. And now I own yours." Olivia's livestream was still running. Her followers were flooding the screen with comments. "Is this real? OMG, this is insane. Her sister just bought the company?" She whispered breathlessly to her phone. "Guys, my sister is Aaron Miles." Nathan slammed his fists against the table so hard the plates rattled. "You've been spying on us. That's corporate espionage." I shook my head slowly. "No, Nathan. It's called market research. Everything I know about Reed Technologies came from public financial reports, industry analysis, and legal channels. No spying. No cheating. Just good business." I turned my gaze back to Dad. "The truth is, Reed Technologies has been failing for years. Outdated technology, old management practices. You've lost 22% of market share in the last 3 years." "How dare you?" Dad started, his voice shaking. "I tried to help you first." I cut him off. 6 months ago, Summit Solutions sent an anonymous partnership proposal. It would have kept the Reed name on the company while giving you the capital and upgrades you needed. You rejected it without even reading the second page. His face went pale. "The Phoenix proposal," he whispered. "That was you." I nodded. "Yes. I gave you the chance to accept help. Your pride didn't allow it. This is betrayal," Nathan shouted, pointing a finger at me. "You plotted against your own family. You stole our legacy." "Not stole," I said firmly. "Bought. Legally. For $50 million. And honestly, that's more than the company is worth right now. The truth is, this stopped being our family business the moment Dad decided only one child, you, Nathan, would ever matter." Olivia finally lowered her phone. Her expression caught between fear and confusion. "So you're going to be our boss now?" she asked in a small voice. "Technically, yes," I replied. "But the management structure is going to change completely." Dad stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the hardwood. "This deal is off. I will not sell my company to my own daughter as part of some revenge scheme." I shook my head slowly, never breaking eye contact. "The contracts are already signed, Dad. The board has approved. The press release goes out tomorrow morning at 9. Legally, Summit Solutions already owns Reed Technologies. His voice cracked with desperation. I'll fight this. My lawyers will. Your lawyers already approved the deal, I interrupted gently. They told you it was the best offer you'd ever get in this market. What exactly will you tell them now? That you're upset because the brilliant so you've been negotiating with turns out to be your daughter. For once he had no words. Finally, he slammed his hand on the table. You have a choice to make, Samantha. You can be my daughter, or you can be the woman who stole my company. You can't be both. The ultimatum stung, but not like it would have years ago. Back then those words would have crushed me. Now they just proved what I'd always known. That's where you're wrong, Dad, I said quietly. I'm both. I've always been both. You just refuse to see it. Across the table, Olivia wiped tears from her face. But what about us? Our trust funds, our positions. That depends, I answered. On whether you want to actually work for the company or just live off the name. Nathan's face twisted with anger. You planned this. You waited until Thanksgiving to humiliate us. I planned it for Thanksgiving, I corrected, because I knew everyone would be here. And because 10 years ago at Thanksgiving dinner, you were promoted to Vice President, Nathan, despite your complete lack of qualifications, while I was told my degree from MIT and years of coding experience weren't enough for an entry-level role. Tonight was poetic. Nothing more. For the first time, even Nathan had no comeback. The room fell silent again, thick with unspoken truths. The dining room was chaos. Dad stormed off, slamming his study doors so hard the walls shook. Mom stumbled after him, wine glass still in hand. Nathan paced like a caged animal, his face red and twisted with anger. Olivia cried loudly, though even in her tears she kept glancing at her phone, angling for the best lighting. I stayed seated, calm, my fork resting neatly beside my half-finished pie. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the invisible daughter. I felt in control. But control doesn't mean peace. That night, the real battles began. It was close to midnight when I heard a sharp knock on my bedroom door. Before I could answer, the door opened and Nathan walked in, his tie loosened, his face flushed with whiskey and rage. We need to talk, he snapped, slamming the door shut behind him. I crossed my arms, leaning against my desk. About what? How you plan to inherit a company you helped run into the ground. He sneered. You think you're so clever, don't you? Little Samantha with her computers playing pretend CEO. Did you enjoy lying to us for 10 years? Enjoy watching us treat you like nothing while you sat there laughing behind our backs? I held his gaze steady. About as much as you enjoyed taking credit for my ideas. His eyes narrowed. Remember Christmas 6 years ago? I continued. When I suggested Reed Technologies move to cloud-based solutions. Dad dismissed it as trendy nonsense. 3 months later, you presented the same idea as your vision, and somehow got praised for it. You've been coasting your whole life on other people's work, Nathan. Mine included. His jaw tightened. At least I stayed. I put in the time. You ran off to California like a spoiled brat trying to prove a point. You stayed, yes, I said evenly. But what exactly did you contribute? Aside from charging expensive dinners to the company card, and sleeping off hangovers in your corner office. His face twisted with fury. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I do, I said calmly, because I've been auditing Reed Technologies' financials for the past year. I know everything, Nathan. He froze. What are you saying? I know about the $300,000 you embezzled, I said softly, each word landing like a hammer. The fake vendor accounts. The phantom consulting fees that went straight to your offshore account. I have the records, the account numbers, the IP logs from your office computer. It's all there. The color drained from his face. You can't prove any of that, he whispered, but his voice cracked. I don't need to prove it, I replied coldly. I already have. I'm choosing not to press charges for now, because dragging this through court would damage the company during transition. But don't mistake my mercy for weakness. Push me and you'll regret it. For a long moment, he just stared at me, fists clenching at his sides. Finally, he spat. You destroy your own brother. I shook my head slowly. No, I'd hold a thief accountable. There's a difference. He stood there, breathing hard, then finally turned toward the door. This isn't over, he muttered, slamming it behind him. I exhaled, steady but shaking inside. Nathan was dangerous when cornered, but now he knew I held the cards. Not even 15 minutes later, another knock. Softer this time. When I opened the door, it was Olivia. She slipped inside, eyes red from crying, makeup smudged, though I noticed she had already reapplied her lipstick. "So you're like a secret millionaire," she said bluntly, sitting cross-legged on my bed. "That's actually kind of badass." I raised an eyebrow. "Funny. You were sobbing about losing your status just a couple of hours ago." She shrugged, examining her manicured nails. "I'm adaptable. That's why my brand works. I pivot." She leaned forward, her voice lowering like we were co-conspirators. "And I have a business idea." I sighed. "Of course you do. Think about it," she said quickly. "My followers already love me. Imagine if I revealed that my sister is a powerful tech CEO. We could create content together. A whole series. The Reed Sisters, Brains and Beauty. You'd humanize your company. I'd boost my engagement, and everyone wins." I stared at her. "So your plan is to turn my business into your social media brand?" She tilted her head. "Well, yeah. You need a public face. Someone relatable. I could be like the brand ambassador for Summit Solutions. The face of an enterprise software company," I repeated slowly, "for the lifestyle market." She rolled her eyes. "Don't mock me. You think my skills aren't valuable, but they are. I built my platform from scratch, just like you built yours. We're more alike than you realize." I paused. For once there was a strange truth in her words. We had both created something from nothing. Hers was selfies and sponsorships. Mine was code and companies. But still, creation is creation. "I'll think about it," I said finally. She beamed like I had just handed her a crown. "Great. Oh, and by the way, I already posted about a major family shakeup. Didn't name names, don't worry. But my engagement is through the roof." I shook my head, half amused, half exhausted. She stood, smoothed her dress, and waltzed out as if she hadn't just watched her family implode hours earlier. It was after 1 in the morning when the last knock came. This time I expected another fight. But when the door opened, it was Mom. She wasn't in her glamorous dress anymore. Just a soft sweater and slacks. Her face looked tired, older somehow, though her eyes were surprisingly clear. "Your father's locked himself in his study with a bottle of scotch," she said quietly, sitting in the window seat. "He's convinced he can find a loophole to stop the sale." "There isn't one," I said simply. She nodded slowly. For a moment she just looked around my room, at the trophies and pennants she'd never taken down. "I kept everything exactly as you left it. I thought you'd come back one day, after this rebellion of yours." "It wasn't rebellion, Mom," I said softly. "It was a career. A life." She sighed, her voice breaking. 200 million. My little girl built a company worth that much, while we all thought you were struggling. "You could have asked," I said, sharper than I meant. "Any of you could have shown interest. But none of you ever wanted to know." Tears welled in her eyes. "I knew. Not the details, not the scale, but I knew you were special. I saw it when you were little. The way your mind worked differently. I didn't know how to help you. Not in this family. Not with a man like your father. You could have stood up for me," I whispered, the old hurt slipping out before I could stop it. Her shoulders sagged. "I know. I told myself I was keeping the peace, being a supportive wife. But I failed you as a mother. I see that now." The simple honesty pierced me deeper than all the shouting earlier. I had expected anger, blame, denial. I hadn't expected remorse. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Tomorrow morning," I said, "the acquisition becomes public. Reed Technologies will become a subsidiary of Summit Solutions. Dad and Nathan will be offered advisory positions with no real power. Olivia, well, she may actually have a place as a brand ambassador if she's serious. As for me, I'll stay in San Francisco. A new team will run things here." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "Your father may never forgive you." "I know," I said softly. "But this was never about forgiveness. It was about finally being seen." She stood, touched my shoulder briefly, and whispered, "I see you now." Then she slipped out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. That night I barely slept. I worked at my old desk, the same one where I had once sketched the ideas that grew into Summit Solutions, finalizing the last details for the press release. Through the floorboards I heard Dad shouting at his lawyers, Nathan storming in and out, Olivia crying dramatically into her phone. The house buzzed with chaos. But for the first time in my old room filled with memories of being overlooked, I felt whole. Tomorrow everything would change. The next morning the house felt heavy, too quiet, almost suffocating. Thanksgiving decorations still sat on the dining table, but the warmth of the holiday was gone. The air was thick with the aftermath of last night's explosion. I came downstairs at 7. Maria, the housekeeper, placed a hot cup of coffee in my hands without a word. Her eyes said everything: worry, respect, maybe even pride. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my executive team. The press release was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. The clock was ticking. That's when I heard his voice. Sam. I turned. My father stood in the doorway of the kitchen. His posture was stiff, his eyes red-rimmed, his face older than I remembered. He hadn't slept. My study. Now. I followed him into the room that had always been his sanctuary. Dark wood-paneled walls. Framed magazine covers featuring him. Awards. Photos of him shaking hands with politicians and CEOs. But not one photo of me. Not one mention of my achievements. He sat behind his massive desk, the same desk where he had dismissed my ideas 10 years earlier. This time I didn't sit in the guest chair like a child. I perched casually on the edge of the desk itself, claiming space. A silent shift in power. He didn't miss it. His jaw tightened. My attorneys confirmed what you said last night, he began, voice clipped. The sale is binding. The board voted unanimously. Legally, Summit Solutions owns Reed Technologies. I nodded. Of course. The board recognized a good offer when they saw it. The company has been losing market share for 3 years. Your technology is outdated. Your management is bloated. The pipeline is empty. You needed this deal. His hand tightened into a fist. 50 million. Just 2 years ago, the company was valued at 70. Overvalued, I said flatly. And you know it. If anyone else had bought you, they would have stripped the assets and dissolved the Reed name. I gave you more than the market would. And I'm keeping the Reed name alive. That's respect, not revenge. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. He leaned back in his chair, staring at me like he didn't know who I was anymore. How did you do it? He asked quietly. How did you build something that valuable, with no connections, no family money, no one backing you? I paused. There was something different in his voice. Not arrogance. Not dismissal. Genuine curiosity. I started small, I said. Freelance coding. Saving every dollar. I lived in a studio apartment, ate ramen for years. Then I built a platform that solved a real problem, connecting old systems with new cloud architecture. The same idea you laughed at in the boardroom. I refined it, made it work. That brought in clients. I reinvested everything, built a team, bought smaller companies, and grew. Step by step. No shortcuts. Just grit. His eyes darkened. I expected you to fail. Do you know that? I thought I was protecting you. 90% of startups collapse in 3 years. I didn't want you crushed by disappointment. By never letting me try, I countered. That's not protection. That's control. He flinched slightly but said nothing. I folded my arms. And speaking of control, you need to know something. Nathan has been embezzling money. At least $300,000. Fake vendor accounts. Phantom consulting fees. I have the records. His face drained of color. That's not possible. It is, I said firmly. Gambling debts. Sports betting. He's been covering it up for years. He slumped back in his chair, looking suddenly very old. So both my son and my company were failing, and I was too blind to see it. I softened my tone just slightly. Not blind, just looking in the wrong direction. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, he spoke again. And what happens now? What's your plan? I let the question sit in the air for a moment. I had waited 10 years for him to ask me that. Reed Technologies will become the enterprise division of Summit Solutions. We'll update the legacy products and integrate them with our cloud platforms. About 60% of the staff will stay. Upper management will change. Completely. And me. His voice cracked slightly on the question. You'll be chairman emeritus, I said. No operational authority, but respected. An office here. a generous compensation package, a figurehead role. His jaw clenched. A puppet. I leaned closer. A legacy role. You'll still be here, still connected, but without the power to sink the ship. He stood abruptly, walking to the window, staring out at the snow-covered lawn. His shoulders sagged. How did I get it so wrong? About you. About the business. About Nathan. I took a breath. Because you never looked past your own reflection. You wanted a son to carry the torch. You never thought your daughter could. He turned back to me. For the first time, there was no arrogance in his eyes. Just something raw. Something almost like pride. You outmaneuvered me completely, he said slowly. Your grandfather would have been impressed. The words hit me harder than I expected. Not vindication, not forgiveness, but something in between. I managed a small smile. I learned by watching you, even when you thought I wasn't paying attention. For the first time in my life, my father extended his hand to me, not as a parent but as an equal. So, Chairman Emeritus, he said. I took his hand. Welcome to Summit Solutions, Dad. By 9 a.m. the press release went out. Headlines spread across Boston business circles. Summit Solutions acquires Reed Technologies in $50 million deal. My name, or rather Aaron Miles, was everywhere. But for me, the bigger victory wasn't the acquisition itself. It was that, for the first time, my father and I had spoken honestly. Not as king and forgotten daughter. Not as ruler in exile. But as two people who finally saw each other clearly. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope. 6 months later, the Reed estate looked different. Not in its marble floors or its sprawling lawns. Those stayed the same. What changed was the atmosphere. The sharp edges of arrogance had softened. The silence that once carried judgment now carried something else. Something closer to peace. So much had shifted since that Thanksgiving. Reed Technologies, now operating under Summit Solutions, was no longer the sinking ship it had been. Our new leadership team moved fast. Outdated systems were replaced. Research and development finally got funding. Within months, new contracts rolled in. Revenue climbed. And the Reed name, the one my father feared would vanish, lived on. Now, instead of being tied to failure, it was tied to innovation. Dad adjusted slowly. At first, he hated being sidelined. But over time, he began to enjoy the role of Chairman Emeritus. He'd come to the office twice a week, shake hands, tell old stories, pose for photos. Employees respected him without depending on him. It gave him dignity. And it gave me space to lead. Nathan wasn't as lucky. The embezzlement couldn't stay hidden forever. I gave him two choices. Step down quietly and enter treatment for his gambling problem, or face a public scandal. For once, he didn't argue. He disappeared for a while. Rehab, therapy, silence. Then, little by little, I heard from him again. Not as the arrogant heir, but as a man finally stripped of the weight of entitlement. He was working at a small consulting firm now, making a modest salary, starting over. And for the first time in my life, he spoke to me not with mockery but with respect. We weren't close. Not yet. But the ice was cracking. Olivia did exactly what Olivia always does, she pivoted. The night of the Thanksgiving explosion had gone viral. Clips from her livestream were shared everywhere. Family Thanksgiving meltdown became a trending topic. First, I was furious. But then, something surprising happened. Her followers weren't just entertained, they were fascinated. They wanted to know more about business, about family dynamics, about me. And Olivia leaned into it. She rebranded herself as a lifestyle and business influencer. She started interviewing female CEOs. She launched a podcast. She wasn't just the pretty Reed daughter anymore. She was carving her own lane. And to my shock, she was good at it. But maybe the biggest change came from Mom. Catherine Reed, the woman who had always stood quietly by Dad's side, finally found her own voice. After that night, she stopped pouring her thoughts into wine glasses. She started therapy. She joined a women's leadership group. She even began speaking publicly about supporting daughters in male-dominated families. One afternoon, she called me and said, "Samantha, I want to start a scholarship for young women in tech. In your name." For the first time in my life, I cried on the phone with my mother. As for me, I kept building. Summit Solutions grew stronger than ever. Reed Technologies became our flagship division, thriving under new leadership. My net worth climbed, my name, or rather Aaron Miles, became a fixture in tech media. But beyond the headlines, I learned something deeper. For years, I thought revenge would be my sweetest victory. I thought proving my family wrong would heal the wounds they left. But standing at the top of the empire I had built, I realized something else. It wasn't about revenge. It was about recognition. It was about finally being seen, not as the forgotten daughter, not as the invisible Reed, but as myself. And strangely, in claiming my place, I gave them space to change too. 6 months later, it was Thanksgiving again. The same table, the same chandelier, but a different mood. Nathan, healthier and quieter, gave thanks for a second chance. Olivia, glowing, gave thanks for her growing platform. Mom, steady and sober, gave thanks for courage she had found later in life. When it was Dad's turn, he cleared his throat. His voice wasn't booming anymore. Just steady. Honest. I'm thankful, he said slowly, for learning that legacies don't come from control. They come from trust. And I'm thankful for my daughter Samantha, who reminded me of that. The room went silent. And then, for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged at that table. Not on the sidelines. Not at the far end. But right in the heart of it. Sometimes the family you're born into doesn't see you for who you are. Sometimes they try to box you in to make you smaller than your potential. But here's the truth. Recognition doesn't always come when you want it. Sometimes you have to build your own empire first. And when you do, even the people who once doubted you can't help but see you clearly.